We are closing in on 20 days until the Huskers season begins. We've been covering position rooms, got a few of the offensive ones out of the way. We're going to slide over to the defensive side of the ball and talk about the defensive backs. Now, Gary, this seems like another strong room for the Huskers. All of their rooms outside of the offensive line, to be honest, seem pretty strong. When I think defensive backs, first thing that comes to mind is Malcolm Hartzog. I feel like he has a combination of Dejon Gomes and Josh Bullock. Dejon Gomes because of his size and play style. Josh Bullock's because the ball just seems to be destined to go into his hands and for big things to happen. Gary, do you think that the defensive back room is stronger or weaker than last season?
I'm going to say stronger, not because of the players necessarily. I feel like most of the players are the same. Few additions, obviously. Farmer just transferred out, but some of the younger guys, like you brought up Hartzog, looking like he did last year as a true freshman, giving a guy like that an extra year. Obviously, Buford will come back at some point, but the 3-3-5 scheme that a lot of people don't like the idea of is kind of what I was clamoring for last year when they kept using linebackers as the nickels, and now rules made it clear it's going to be a safety. So having the 5 DBs, which I felt like that room was one of the more athletic and more consistent you kind of rely on. There was definitely flaws. Some guys didn't have high end speed. Some guys obviously weren't sure tacklers or would bite on fakes, things like that. But I mean, that's just stuff that has to be worked out. But overall athleticism, talent wise, I think giving yourself another one of those guys on the field the majority of the time, especially with the hype we hear about Gifford and things like that, I think it'll look a lot better on the field this year than it did last year. I think the room's pretty similar to last year, though.
I think it does hurt losing Farmer, but you made a really interesting point to me the other day off camera, talking about how you have a theory that they might have just wanted him to go because he wasn't good enough for their style. Do you stand by that?
I don't know that I'm all in on it. I was suggesting it. I heard that. I can't remember who was talking about it, but some other YouTuber or media people or somebody was talking about it.
And you don't want to give them credit.
Yeah, that's what it is. Yeah. No, I can't remember exactly where I heard it, but it makes sense. But it also kind of doesn't, so, but I mean, if you look at the possibility of how realistic that could be, he had a lot of trouble in a lot of the film breakdowns after games that you and I did, where he would get drawn into, say, an A or B gap situation and runs. Especially, I don't remember the game. I remember the play real clearly. It was like a goal line defense, and he ran inside, left the outside wide open. The running back was able to get loose off the edge. Didn't have top end speed, but I mean, obviously did some good things. He was the second highest tackler on the squad. So, I don't know. It's just a theory that I had heard. And again, I can't remember where I heard it from, but that's why I brought it up to you to see what you thought about it, or, kind of that idea, especially if they were trying to do that and trying to set kind of a standard of like, if you're not good enough, you're gone. That's a good position group to do it with because you've got plenty of guys there, it seems like. And then what we hear now that practices are going on, it seems like guys from that group are starting to stand out and separate themselves.
So then would it be fair to say that Quentin Newsom is our clear-cut best guy in the secondary?
I would say for the corners, for sure. I know you like Hartzog, but I mean, he's young. He got beat a lot last year.
And he's tiny. 5'9", 175. I just feel like Quentin Newsom has a higher ceiling being 6'1", 185. I remember him tackling decently. Pretty good in coverage. He's built for that life.
He's an NFLer. He's for
that's
sure
what he looks
like.
like.
He's going to get drafted next year. I mean, barring a crazy, even maybe if he gets injured, I wouldn't be surprised if somebody gets him late. But I mean, I see him for sure getting drafted. I don't know overall talent. I've always been kind of impressed with Buford. He gets out of position sometimes too, and who knows? You want to assume that the newer system's going to suit them better. That's what we hear about, and it seems to be geared more towards the defensive backs. But maybe there's going to be a transition period, or maybe scheme isn't just going to fit guys as easily as they did in other ones. So maybe they will look worse. It's not like you said at the beginning of this, and I was thinking the same thing as you were talking. Outside of the offensive line group, I think everybody assumes that. The majority of people are assuming that each group is going to look better this year but we thought that last year, with the new coaches coming in. We thought that when Frost took over and had Riley's guys, like, they'll be better now they're in this system. So, I mean, it's tough to say, but I think Quentin Newsom, he's a senior, you know what I mean? And he's already talking about him going to the NFL. Like, he should look better and be better than a guy like Malcolm Hartzog, and that's not a knock on him. I think he'll be a stud. He could have a better career than Newsom at the end of it, but he's only going into his second year and didn't really start getting a lot of time or play, until more towards midseason last year. So, yeah, I would say Newsom, but like I said, depending on how Buford is when he comes back and how well he's picked up the system, he's not able to practice. You know what I mean? He can learn the system, but he can't play in it and get used to it. So I'll be curious to see how he is, but I really like him overall as a safety.
So you mentioned Isaac Gifford. What's his role going to be exactly?
That rover, that fifth, that jack, whatever you want to call it. Different defenses have different names for it, but he's going to essentially be the third safety. That when you're watching the games, the formations and lineup on defense aren't going to look any different than last year, really, except you're going to have a safety, which is funny because Gifford was that linebacker that played that nickel spot, and now he's going to be a safety that's kind of playing the same type of a deal. But I mean, they'll do different things with it. I'm just saying, like on the face when they line up. So I don't think a ton's changing for him. If anything, it sounds like this fits him better, like he's really able to excel. But I love the idea of having an actual defensive back, and rules specified that it's going to be a safety that plays that. So essentially, we're going to go 2 corners, 3 safeties, as opposed to last year where it was 2 and 2, and then we had the extra linebacker playing that nickel spot. So I like that. I like the idea of a little bit. Typically, you have a little bit more better tackling than the corners and your safeties, but more athleticism than most of your linebackers when you're trying to play that spot. So I think it's a comfortable, smooth, easy transition for him. That, I mean, I haven't seen anything obviously, but from the sounds of it, this is really allowing him to excel and develop and get closer and closer to his max potential, the role they have him playing in the new defense. All
right, so on to a guy here who had a lot of hype coming over to Nebraska from ASU. Played corner at the beginning. The Frost coaching staff thought maybe he should be a wide receiver. And I understand he's got good hands. When you watch his highlights, especially, he's fast, but I think he's got decent hands for a corner. He's back at corner, so it seems like Rule likes him better at his original position. I'm a fan of keeping guys their original position, but sometimes it works. Stanley Jean-Baptiste comes to mind. Yeah. Moved him to corner as from being a wide receiver, and he killed it. I'm very hopeful and excited for Tommy Hill this season. He's so physical. I think that's his strength. Physicality at the line of scrimmage. I'm hopeful that with another year of putting it together mentally, he could be shockingly good.
They had to have seen something, because to me, I agree with everything you said, except last year, he just got burnt so easy. And it wasn't lack of skill. It was lack of discipline, mental discipline. He would bite on things. He would think that a play was kind of shut down and stop, and then all of a sudden it's going, or a guy's behind him. Obviously, those things are fixable. You just practice and drill and work on your focus, stay focused through the entire play. But with that, I feel like from what little bit I saw of him on defense before he did move to wide receiver, I always felt like he should have been a safety. I felt like he was kind of a safety trying to play corner at times. And I know there's high school highlights and different things like that of him doing really well, locking guys up at corner. But at this level and this speed, you can't just Deion Sanders all the time and just, I'll catch up to him if I miss it or whatever. You know what I mean? Like sometimes you get beat, it's too late. So I really do, as much as I can without saying anything, trust this staff with having guys move. I know that the style of defense, again, that 3-3-5, there's been some guys that were considered linebackers that are now considered safeties. Like you said, they're moving him back. There's some other spots on the offensive side where they're moving guys around. But if they think that's where he goes, and obviously they're seeing him and working with them all the time, until I have reason not to, I trust when they come out and say, this dude's looking good, this dude's doing his thing, we're putting him here because he fits and he does well, whatever. So yeah, man, I mean, when you have that much athleticism, that's what you recruit, right? You always want those guys that have the high 40 times and the 100-meter times and can jump high and all that stuff that looks great. But it's like, you just really hope that they can put that in the mental side and the gameplay scenarios all together. And I feel like he was missing the situational side and a lot of the mental errors that happen. So hopefully that's fixed, because it'd be really nice to see some of these really athletic guys put it all together, and show out on Saturdays.
I feel like those are the big hitters in the secondary. Other than them, there are so many DBs. Corey Collier, who came over from Florida with Chief Borders, dope name, dopest name. I mean, right. Him and Blaze Gunnerson. What are we doing here? Like, so jealous. Dwight Boodle, young freshman, also 5'9", 170. Yeah. Maybe at some point takes over for Malcolm Hartzog. Maybe they're going to end up playing the same role. Of course, that's DiCaprio's little brother, so that's kind of cool. Any of these young guys you want to mention or think are going to play any sort of role this season that we need to watch out for?
I mean, it's tough. There's so many guys that, like, most of them aren't even listed on the preseason depth chart thing or whatever right now. So, like, to sit here and break down or go over all of them is a huge waste of time. Just, I mean, who would watch all the way through? But, like Omar Brown, like I'm excited to see what he can do. He's a senior, he's been around, probably will start most likely, especially with Buford out and now that Farmer's gone. So yeah, I mean, that kind of moves it up to where maybe you get Deshaun Singleton back in. He had some good amount of hype last year and then got in for a little bit and did some things, was decent. David Wright, last year we were talking about it, you had 2 corners and 2 safeties. And now this year you've got 3 safeties, essentially 2 corners, and your starting safeties from last year are both not going to be there to start things out unless Buford just jumps in, Minnesota or Colorado game. So, I mean, now you've opened it up to where a lot of these guys, they're going to have their feel by the time season's over. But once the games start going on and they actually see what these guys do in game, we've talked about that tons of times of guys who practice great and played like shit or not practice well, but when they have their times where they finally get in the game, you're like, why don't they start this dude? He's way better, but it's because he doesn't practice well. So I think we'll get to see a lot of DBs, period, but especially the safeties kind of getting rotated through earlier on in the season. But I would expect Omar Brown to be the main starter at safety until they figure out one, who's filling in for Gifford or how long he's going to be gone, and then who can play their way into those areas, or the first ups when they're cycling out, rotating out guys, getting a little farther down the depth chart. But there's for sure a lot of things to be excited about with the younger guys. But again, it goes back to like when we talk about Tommy Hill. All these guys are athletic for the most part. That's how they get to where they're at. But can they put it together at that level mentally and on the field? So, I mean, that's what I'm most curious to see. But I think if you just assume Buford doesn't miss too much time or doesn't take too long to get reacclimated with things, that the starting 5 you're going to have in your backfield, I really like the way that sets up to start out the season.
Tell us what you guys think in the comments. Are there any defensive backs you feel like we didn't give enough love? Thanks for hanging out. We'll see you guys next time. Go Big Red.